Hey guys, Mr. Musak back with some more history for y'all. We looked at some of the new inventions, new ideas that developed in the Gilded Age or the latter half of the 1800s, and we're moving now to the discovery and invention of the idea of big business. So how big business gets going. In the late 19th century, we see the start of big corporations. So that's going to be corporations that are run by, instead of being run by one person, they're run by a group of stockholders. So the company is actually owned by people who own stock. Now, what stock is just a piece of the company. So I can go to a stockbroker, I can buy a hunk of stock, I can buy a share of a company essentially for a certain amount of money. If I want to buy some Google, I can pay $150 a share and buy shares of Google. Now, by owning that piece of stock, I have some benefits to it, okay? First off, I can earn dividends. That means when that company makes a profit, they'll pay me out a little bit of that profit for being an owner. Also, if all of a sudden Google makes a bunch of money and their stock price goes up, I can sell that stock off and make money off of it. Now, this new era of big business creates a whole bunch of new millionaires, both people who own the companies themselves, as well as all their investors that make money off of these new big companies that get going. Now, these new millionaires are called new money. Essentially, new regular people who became millionaires through industry. It's kind of that rags to riches story, if you will, how people made money. Now, they kind of tend to butt heads a little bit with the old money. And old money are those who have always been rich. Their parents were rich, grandparents were rich, so on and so forth. They may have been in this country forever. And so we kind of see this kind of new dynamic start between the old money and the new money in the world. Now, one of the first big businesses, of course, is the railroads, okay? Railroads were important, as we learned in the last unit. And one of the things they got from the government was lots of free help. A lot of times railroads got free land. They were called subsidies. Basically, the government would pay land for railroads to be built because railroads are helping the country. And one of the biggest guys that got involved with this was this guy right here, a guy by the name of Cornelius Vanderbilt. He was the railroad king. He started off in shipping, like international shipping, but then he started doing railroads later on because he could make more money that way. So they call him the Commodore because of his shipping prowess. Now, one of the big problems with the railroads is that there was no government regulation of railroads. Railroads could do whatever they wanted to. And so they decided to make profit any way they could. That includes giving, as we talked about last unit a little bit, preferential treatment to certain people, certain companies, and those kind of things. The way this happened was through the idea of rebates right here. They might overcharge rates on some people. They might give rebates to different people, that kind of thing. Sometimes they gave government kickbacks, so to make sure they could keep doing things they wanted to do, they would, bribe, pay off people in the government, those kind of things. Also, a lot of people brought up the idea of the workers who work the railroads. A lot of times railroad workers were immigrants, either Irish or Chinese, very low pay, very tough jobs, and so a lot of times those workers were mistreated a lot. One of the things that Vanderbilt did was that he was able to raise a lot of money, build his railroads up, and then buy out the other railroad companies. And at one point, Vanderbilt owned a majority of the railroads in the country, and he started making the railroads better. One of the things they did was they started putting in steel rails. They used to use iron. Iron had a tendency to bend or break, and when the iron rail would bend or break, the train could derail and do a lot of damage. The other thing he created was something called standard gauge. Kind of hard to see down here, but you see this right down here? The gauge is the distance between rails, and actually made the gauge 4 foot 10 inches, which is the same thing as our modern day road lanes now. And so he made that every single railroad would be the exact same gauge. Before this, every railroad company made their own gauge of railroad. That meant that the railroad cars could not share lines. Now, any one railroad car could go any place across the entire country basically because all the rails are the exact same distance apart. Vanderbilt is one of our first 100 millionaires out there. He makes tons of money as part of this, but eventually does lose some of it. One of the biggest scams of this time period was something called the Credit Mobilier scandal. A huge railroad scam. Basically, the Union Pacific Railroad Company created a dummy construction company, a fake construction company to build their railroads. They got millions of dollars of work from the government on a government contract and just pocketed all that money because that railroad company, that construction company, did not exist. And then when people started saying, hey, there's money, where's money missing, where'd that money go? Supposedly they actually bribed congressmen to keep under wraps. And so we kind of see these are the kind of things that were happening in the latter part of the 19th century as part of this whole big business thing. Eventually a group does get made in 1887 called the ICC. It's the Interstate Commerce Commission. And the original job was just to regulate the railroads. There's a rule in the Constitution that says only Congress may regulate interstate trade. That means if a good crosses state lines, Neither state has a say in it. Only the federal government and Congress has a say in that. So they made this commission, and these guys are right over here, okay, to basically look into all the things happening with railroads and fix the problems. And so this group tried to make things fair, make railroads publish rates, keep the rates fair, no discrimination. What we call the Granger laws last unit. But fortunately, those laws were deemed unconstitutional. So you have some issues there with trying to make sure the railroads stay in line. Now, we see big companies happen, and it happens through different ways, mostly trust, mergers, and cartels. The goal is to be a monopoly. Now, monopoly, if you play the game, means that you own everything or be the only producer in that market. I want to have an oil monopoly. If you're buying oil or gas from me, the only place you can get that is from my company, and that's it. You have no other choice to buy from anybody else. It'd be like if there's only one cell phone company out there. If there's only one cell phone company, they could charge whatever they want to charge because, there's no other choice. And so the goal is to try to be a monopoly so you can set your prices. Now, you can do that through a lot of different ways, through trusts, mergers, and cartels. Now, a trust is the hardest to explain. You kind of take all the companies in the one field, and you kind of work together. You sign you form a trust agreement, so you have a kind of a committee of owners that get together, and there's this person in charge of that committee. Now, these companies are not going to compete with each other. Instead, they're going to work together. And they're work together so they can set their prices together and make money for that trust holder. It doesn't look like a merger where there's just one company. Still individual companies, but they're basically all working together to make money and to set the prices. And we're going to see how some trusts come up later on. We also have mergers. Now, merging is when two companies merge right together. You see this with banks a lot today. But basically, so you can buy out your opposition or buy out a failing company and just add their factories, add their stores, add their shops to yours and underneath your name. So eventually, you make you the only company in that market. If it's BP Oil, if BP Oil bought out all the other gas stations out there, that would be the only one you have, and that would be the idea of a merger that way. You also have a cartel. Now, cartel is a little different. Cartel is when you control all the supplies for your company. So going all the way back, you control all the supplies you have. And so it might be you own the iron mine, you own the coal field, you own the steel mill, you own the refinery, you own the railroad that ships everything, you own the construction company that makes a bridge, all that kind of stuff. So basically you're owning or associating with your suppliers to make sure you get cheap supplies and keep a high price on your good and keep nice high profits. Usually you hear the cartel as terms of the drug cartel. That goes everything from the producer, that's kind of what you hear in the news and the media, that kind of stuff. It's the same kind of idea where gangs or organizations control production of the substance to the sale of substance and keep their prices that way. Now, we have different ways to integrate stuff, and on your handout we're going to talk about different ways of integration. And so you take a look at your handout that I have along with you guys. There's horizontal and vertical integration. Guys, take a look at the horizontal integration for me. All horizontal integration means that you're covering one level of production. So let's say I'm refining oil, okay? I have making crude oil. I have crude oil, like I get out of the ground. I have to ship it somewhere. Then I refine it. Okay, then you can sell your processed gas or kerosene or whatever. If I'm doing horizontal integration, I'm working to buy all the other refineries out so that just that one refined good is mine. That's the idea of horizontal integration, just under one level. Vertical is a lot different. Take a look at vertical integration for me, please. Vertical means it's like basically a cartel where you control all parts of your good. From the if I'm in an oil vertical horizontal integration of oil, I may own the oil field. I may own the railroad bringing the crude oil to my refinery. I own the refinery. I own the railroad that takes my refined good to the store. I own the store where they're selling my finished good. And that way, all the money along that line goes right to me. So that's kind of where the two ideas of integration work out. We'll see examples here in a second. Now, the big businessmen this time were called robber barons, kind of because they control the industry. And they ran different trusts, cartels, and became really, really rich by creating their monopolies in their field. Some of these guys were new money, some of these guys were old money, but we're kind of see that these guys are come to control almost everything in the late 19th century. One of the first big ones was a guy named Andrew Carnegie. He was kind of that classic rags to riches story. He was the son of Scottish immigrants. He was working at age 14 or so. By 18, he was working in a railroad telegraph office, and one of the things they did in that railroad telegraph office, he was doing such a good job, is that his boss, who was kind of his mentor, decided to pay him in railroad stock, basically letting him at 18 years old buy into that company. Carnegie then took that and made more money off of that, and eventually got into the steel business. One way he got into that was by managing railroads during the Civil War. Now, eventually, Carnegie opens up these big, huge steel mills in Pennsylvania, especially around the city of Pittsburgh, and uses that Bessemer steel process to make good, cheap steel. And so he focused on making especially rails for railroads because that was the biggest industry. Now, Carnegie focused on vertical integration. He used to lower the prices and make a way that sure that his steel was cheaper than other people's steel. So he owned iron ore fields up in Minnesota. He owned the shipping lanes across the Great Lakes. He owned the coal fields in West Virginia. All those kind of things he owned and put together so that he could control the competition. He could make sure his prices were lower and control those things. So he's an example of vertical integration. Eventually, Carnegie's his steel industry gets so big he sells it to banker J.P. Morgan, who works with Carnegie to merge all steel companies together, that'd be your horizontal integration, and make the first ever billion-dollar business in the United States. Eventually he retires. He's worth over $250 million and starts giving his money away to different charities, those kind of things. We have John D. Rockefeller. Now, Rockefeller was a little different. He was in the oil industry. He started out in Cleveland, and first he tried making kerosene. And he goes with a cartel to start off with. Work the railroads. He gets a good rebate. Make sure his kerosene is sold at a lower rate than everybody else's. Because he has lower prices, people are buying his kerosene versus other people's kerosene, and he starts buying everybody else out. Now, eventually, he takes that and makes a Standard Oil Trust out of it. He works with 41 other oil companies to lower the price of kerosene so other companies can't compete with them, and then buys them out, making Standard Oil the #1 oil dealer in the country. He then, after he got bought everybody else out, they jack the prices up and make all kinds of money. He's actually your first billionaire in the world. At the time, he was the richest man in the entire world at that time in the 19th century. You also have a man named J.P. Morgan, John Pierpont Morgan. He was a banker originally, okay? He started in banking, and he was kind of a financier as well. He would basically buy failing businesses, reorganize them, fix them, and make them successful. At the time, they called it Morganization. He did this in a lot of different fields. One place he did it was in the newspaper field. He'd buy newspapers that were going under and fix the organization, fix the management, make them better, and then they'd be successful newspapers. The most successful by far is the New York Times, which is by far the most read newspaper in the world, and kind of the kind of sets the bar for what makes a newspaper good. He also was in the steel industry. He worked with Andrew Carnegie to make U.S. Steel. At the time, it was basically a whole monopoly of all the steel in the country. And so he created a huge billion-dollar company with U.S. Steel to build steel for the rest of the country. He then took that steel he used and funded it for construction of bridges, skyscrapers, all these new buildings, things that were being built all around the country using that U.S. Steel. The funny thing is that people actually called him out on it. People called him out on holding a monopoly, but whatever. I mean, he really didn't care too much about that. He also created a couple of companies that are still around today. One of the big ones is General Electric. Edison General Electric originally, and he merged with other companies to make the idea of modern-day General Electric, which created a lot of the new electrical devices for that time. One of the funny things about J.P. Morgan is that he actually hated being photographed. He had a condition on his nose. His nose actually turned purple, kind of weird, but he actually hated being photographed, and it was kind of one of those weird little things that about this guy, I guess. Now, a lot of these robber barons subscribe to the idea of social Darwinism. Now, we're told Darwin in biology is being survival of the fittest, right? The idea that you can survive when other people can't, and because you change, you survive. In America, it was the same exact thing. But instead of being strong enough, like physically strong enough to do it, it was, are you good enough? Are you smart enough? Will you succeed in business making money? So basically, it kind of said that if you're poor, it's your own fault. You know what I mean? If you're poor, it's your own fault because you don't fit in. You aren't smart enough, you're not skilled, and you deserve that lower job. It's kind of the idea of social Darwinism comes in. We'll talk about that a little more in class, actually. Last thing I want to touch on today is the idea of philanthropy. And one of the things that these robber barons, these big rich people do at this time is the idea of philanthropy, basically giving money for public good. A lot of times these guys had more money than they knew what to do with, and so a lot of the robber barons donated tons of money to the arts, libraries, universities, schools, those kind of things. Now, obviously then, their name also gets plastered all over those things. Like Andrew Carnegie gave money to art museums and libraries. The picture on here is a Carnegie Museum right here. Up here is Carnegie, kind of a poster for him, giving $100 million given for the public good because he gave that much money out. You know, it's Carnegie. He's Scottish. He has a kilt on. Morgan, J.P. Morgan gave a huge book collection, art and free art museum in New York City. Rockefeller donated over $540 million in his lifetime for the arts at universities, those kind of things. And so you see a lot of these names on universities, those kind of places. That's all notes for today, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys in class.